Welcome to Holistic Coaching Excellence. I'm Mar DiCarlo, founder of the International Parenting and Health Institute, a global leader in holistic coaching education since 2009, supporting professionals in birth, sleep, parenting, and health fields around the world. I created this podcast for professionals who feel a quiet pull toward doing this work differently, not just coaching harder, not just collecting more certifications, but becoming more skillful, more grounded, and more effective with their clients and in their business. This show is for both new coaches and experienced practitioners because mastery isn't about how long you've been coaching. It's about how you hold the work and how you sustain yourself while doing it. In this podcast, we're going to talk about the real challenges coaches face: clients who don't follow through, resistance that shows up mid session, blurred boundaries, imposter syndrome, and the habit of over-educating instead of coaching. We'll also talk about the realities of running a coaching practice, pricing your work ethically, marketing without selling your soul, growing visibility without burning out, and building a business that actually supports your life, not consumes it. My work has always lived at the intersection of deep coaching skill, embodiment, nervous system awareness, ethics, and sustainable business practices. This show is not about hustle. It's not about shortcuts, and it's definitely not about becoming someone you're not. It's about refining your craft, strengthening your presence, and learning how to grow a practice that feels aligned, steady, and sustainable. If you're here, it means you care deeply about your clients and you're ready to elevate how you show up in sessions and in your work. New episodes every Thursday. Welcome to Holistic Coaching Excellence. I'm Mar DiCarlo, and I'm really glad you're here. Today we're talking about the number one mistake coaches continue to make, even experienced, well-trained, deeply caring coaches. And that's educating instead of coaching. Most coaches don't do this because they're bad at what they do. They do it because they care. They want to help. They want to provide value. They want clients to understand. But when coaching turns into educating, something subtle happens. Clients gain information, but transformation stalls. In this episode, we're going to unpack why this happens, how it impacts your clients, and what true coaching mastery actually looks like, both in your sessions and in how you build your practice. Let's start by naming it. Educating instead of coaching can look like over-explaining, teaching concepts instead of asking questions, filling silence too quickly, fixing instead of exploring, and answering the client's questions before they fully arrive at their own insight. And here's the important part. This doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It usually means one of three things. You're trying to be helpful, you're trying to prove your value, and you're trying to reduce discomfort, yours or your clients'. Many coaches were trained to believe that knowledge is what makes them valuable. So when a client is struggling, the instinct is, let me explain this better. But coaching isn't about how much the client understands. It's about how much they can integrate and embody. And this is where it gets real. A lot of overeducating is rooted in self-doubt, fear of being questioned, imposter syndrome, tying worth to expertise. Some coaches even feel pressure to sound smart, maybe justify their pricing, prove that they know more than the client. But here's the truth. The more you explain, the less space the client has to discover. Silence isn't a lack of skill. Silence is often where coaching actually happens. When you rush to educate, you may unintentionally interrupt the client's internal process. Here's something that most coaches eventually learn the hard way. Insight doesn't equal transformation. Clients can understand perfectly, agree completely, nod along enthusiastically, and still not change a thing. And that's because behavior doesn't shift through information alone. It shifts through awareness, felt experience, agency, and integration over time. So when coaching becomes education heavy, clients become passive. Responsibility subtly shifts to the coach, and follow through weakens. This is where coaches start asking, why do my clients understand everything, but still they don't follow through? They don't do it. When clients are overeducated, they rely on you instead of themselves. They feel overwhelmed. Maybe they lose confidence in their own capacity. Follow through breaks down not because clients are lazy or unmotivated, but because they haven't fully owned the process. You see, coaching mastery isn't about directing behavior, it's about helping clients access their own internal authority. And that's what creates sustainable change. Exceptional coaches ask fewer but better questions. They're comfortable with silence. They slow sessions down. They listen for what isn't being said. They trust the client's nervous system and timing. They read body language. They pick up on the language being used by their clients. They understand that discomfort isn't failure, that resistance is information, and that progress isn't always linear. They don't rush transformation, they hold it. And this applies not only in sessions, but in how you build your business. The same coaches who overeducate clients often overdeliver for free, underprice their work, and they burn out trying to prove their worth. Coaching excellence includes learning how to value your presence, price your work ethically, and grow sustainably without exhaustion. So if you've recognized yourself in this episode, that's not a problem. That's growth. Coaching mastery is not about doing everything right. It's about refining how you show up over time. And what can be very helpful is noticing how you communicate, observing yourself. What is a challenge for you when you're working with your client? When they take a pause, what story are you telling yourself during that pause if you rush to fill in the gap? If you find yourself over explaining or over educating, begin to observe why that may be. Is it because you don't trust yourself enough to be worthy and you feel by over explaining yourself that will do it? So, part of your practice is to begin observing without judgment, begin observing and noticing when triggers arise, when discomfort arises, and inviting in space, inviting in those moments where the space becomes powerful, where you allow the silence to do the work and not just your talking. And the more you invite that in, you will find beliefs coming up that then you'll question and say, well, is this true? And you'll take time to reflect on those. And it becomes a learning experience for yourself. And that is what's really great about mastering coaching is that you're on this journey where you're supporting your clients and you're also learning so much about yourself and where you're uncomfortable and where your edges are. And the more you show up for that, the more you can show up for your clients. What I find very helpful is at the beginning of every session to take a moment to set an intention and to also connect with your body, connect with your breath. You can invite your client to do the same. Take a very short moment of silence before the talking begins. And from there, that will lead the session in a way where you're setting up a very strong foundation. In the next episode, we're going to build on this and talk about why clients don't follow through and how great coaches address that without blaming themselves or their clients. If you're here, it means you care deeply about your work. And that, my friends, is a foundation of excellence. Welcome to Holistic Coaching Excellence. I'm Mar DiCarlo. I'm really glad you're here, and I'm very excited about today's episode. We're going to talk about one of the most common topics that I often get asked about, and this is why clients don't follow through, even if they're motivated, committed, and genuinely want change. And we're also going to discuss what exceptional coaches do differently to empower sustainable follow through without pressure, force, or burnout. This is one of the most misunderstood challenges in coaching and one of the most clearest places where mastery shows up. But before we dive in, I want to offer a brief settling and arriving moment because this conversation isn't just about coaching strategies. It's about presence, awareness, and how change actually happens. A quick note before we begin. Now and throughout this entire podcast, if you are driving, operating machinery, or need to stay externally focused, please skip any of the exercises in this episode. Simply just listen. You can always return to them later. Now, if you're able to, let's pause for a moment. Wherever you are, gently bring your attention inward. Notice your body. Notice your breath. Notice how you're arriving into this conversation. There's nothing to fix right now, nothing to solve. Just a moment to settle in and arrive. Take a slow inhale through your nose and then a longer exhale through your mouth. Feel your shoulders soften. Feel any tightness in your jaw beginning to unclench. And let your nervous system know that it's safe to slow down. Because the truth is, coaching outcomes are deeply connected to nervous system states, both yours and your clients'. And with that in mind, let's dive into today's episode. Why clients don't follow through and how great coaches don't force change, they empower it. One of the most common frustrations coaches share is this: my client understands everything. They say that our sessions are helpful. They feel motivated in the moment, but then nothing changes. And often the unspoken fear underneath is, am I not good enough coach? Am I missing something? Do I need better tools? Or is it my fault that they're not following through? So let's be clear right away. Client follow through is not a willpower problem, and it's rarely an information problem. Most of your clients already know what to do. They know they should go to bed earlier, for example, set boundaries, eat differently, communicate more clearly, stop self sabotaging. Knowledge is not the missing piece. So then, what is? All right, let's go through a few reasons why your clients are not following through. The plan doesn't match their capacity. Many clients are operating at or beyond capacity. They're overwhelmed, overstimulated, emotionally taxed, dysregulated. And so when a coach offers a plan that exceeds the client's current nervous system capacity, follow through becomes impossible. Not because the client doesn't care, but because their system can't sustain it. A regulated nervous system can integrate change. A dysregulated one resists it. This isn't resistance, it's protection. Another reason is that your client may have been given solutions before being fully seen. Clients often disengage when they feel misunderstood, rushed, talked at, maybe judged. When solutions then arrive before full attunement, your clients may nod along, but internally, they disconnect. You see, compliance is not commitment. Great coaches, they know this difference. Another reason, shame is driving the change attempt. If a client is trying to change because they feel broken, behind, wrong, not enough, their nervous system associates the plan with threat. Shame creates short bursts of motivation, but long term avoidance. Clients don't follow through on plans that reinforce self rejection. Another reason, the coaching becomes educational instead of experiential. Now, this is a big one. When sessions turn into explanations, teaching, information delivery, the client stays in their head. Now, don't get me wrong, there is room for knowledge, there is room for explanation, but if that is the majority of the session, that's where this can go sideways. Change happens through embodiment, awareness, emotional integration, and lived experience along with knowledge. Insight alone does not rewire behavior. Another reason is your client's identity and story haven't been addressed. If your client's not following through, it may have nothing to do with motivation, discipline, or even capacity. It may have to do with their identity. Every client is operating from a story about who they are. That story might sound like, I've always been inconsistent, or I'm not disciplined, or this is just how I am, or I try things, but I never stick with them, or I'm bad at routines, or I've always struggled with follow through. Here's the key point, behavior will always align with identity. So if your client's internal identity is built around being someone who struggles, fails, or falls off, then no action plan, no matter how brilliant, is going to stick for long. Because following through would require them to become someone unfamiliar. And unfamiliar doesn't feel safe or comfortable to the nervous system. Many clients unconsciously protect their identity, even when that identity causes suffering. So when a coach introduces change without addressing identity, the nervous system responds with avoidance, procrastination, maybe forgetting, or, the something came up excuse. Not because your client doesn't want change, but because change threatens the story they've lived inside for years. Great coaches recognize this and ask questions like, who do you believe you are when it comes to follow through? What would it mean about you if this did work? What part of you feels unsure about becoming someone new? Follow through requires identity safety, not just strategy. Clients must feel safe loosening and letting go of an old story before they can step into a new one. Okay, before we move on, let's take another pause here because this piece matters more than most people realize. So I want you to take a moment with me here. I invite you to take this moment. And again, if you are driving or operating machinery or doing anything else, you can return back to this later. Otherwise, if you are able to, let's begin. You don't need to fix anything. You don't need to force insight. Just observe. Take a gentle breath in through your nose and then a slow exhalation through your mouth. And as you're doing that, ask yourself this question quietly. Who do I believe I am when it comes to follow through? Allow the first answer to arise, not the polished one, the honest one. You might notice words like inconsistent, unreliable, overwhelmed, all or nothing, capable but exhausted. Whatever comes up for you, let it be there. And then gently ask yourself, where may I have learned this story? Was it formed in childhood, through past failures, through pressure, through years of being stretched beyond capacity? You don't need to analyze it. Just be aware of this story that had a beginning. Now take another slow inhalation and exhalation and ask yourself, if this story were allowed to change, what would be possible for me? Not what should be possible. What feels safe to imagine? So if this story were to change, if it were allowed to change, what would feel possible? Even something small, even something imperfect. Now take another deep inhalation and slow exhalation. Here's the most important reframe to understand. Struggling with follow through doesn't mean that you're broken. It often means your nervous system has been protecting an old identity. Change becomes possible not when we demand more from ourselves, but when we create safety for a new story to emerge. Now, you can carry that with you as we continue, and this can be something that you can introduce to your clients. Another reason why your clients may not be following through is that the action steps you provided them were too general. I see this happen so often. The action steps that you provided were too vague. Not wrong, not unhelpful, just too general. For example, you might say, try to take daily pauses to your client. Or you might say to them, work on regulating your nervous system. Or be more mindful this week. Or set better boundaries. Now, all of these sound supportive, but they leave too much room for interpretation. And when a client is already overwhelmed, vague instructions become invisible. And the nervous system doesn't act on concepts, it acts on clarity. Exceptional coaches get specific and practical. So instead of take daily pauses, you might say, this week on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday at 12:30 p.m., set a 15-minute timer, step away from your phone, sit or walk, and practice this one breathing pattern. Okay? Very, very big difference. This matters because it reduces decision fatigue, it lowers nervous system load, it increases perceived achievability. General plans require constant self-navigation. However, specific plans create containment, and containment builds follow-through. So this is not about micromanaging your client. It's about supporting integration. Great coaches understand that if a plan requires too much interpretation, it's not going to survive a stressed week. So when your clients don't follow through, it's rarely because they didn't care. It's often because the plan exceeded their capacity. Their nervous system didn't feel safe. Shame may have been driving the change. The work stayed intellectual. Their identity wasn't addressed, or the action steps weren't concrete enough to integrate practically and realistically. When you see it this way, the question stops being, what's wrong with my client? And it becomes, what does this moment reveal about what they actually need? And that's where coaching excellence begins. Let's take another breath. And now think of a recommendation you've either given to a client recently or received yourself. So inhale through your nose slowly, exhale through your nose as you're thinking of this recommendation given to your client recently or that you've received yourself. Something like take more breaks, or be more consistent, or maybe practice self care, or set better boundaries. Observe it. And then ask yourself this question: could a stressed, overwhelmed human realistically do this exactly as stated? Most of the time, the answer is no. Not because they're resistant, but because the instruction is too abstract. So let's refine it. Ask, when exactly? Is your action step tied to a day, a time, or a context? For how long? Is it 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 15 minutes? What does it look like in the body? Movement, breath, maybe stillness, or maybe a pause between tasks? What makes it doable on a hard day, not a perfect one? Here's the key distinction: practice daily pauses this week, general, versus on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, set a timer for 3 minutes after lunch, step away from screens, take slow breaths, then return. One is aspirational, the other is actionable. Remember this: follow through improves when the nervous system can say, I can do that. Specificity creates safety. Safety creates action. This is where coaching becomes effective, not because it's impressive, but because it's humane. When clients don't follow through, most coaches respond instinctively and with good intentions. They may offer more tools, add more strategies, re explain the why, increase accountability or pressure. On the surface, this looks supportive, but underneath, it often carries a subtle power struggle. The coach pushes back, the client pulls back, not consciously, but nervously. Because pressure, even well meaning pressure, activates defense. When a client feels behind, monitored, corrected, subtly judged, their nervous system doesn't move toward action, it moves toward protection, even defensiveness. This is where follow through quietly breaks down. Not because your client doesn't care, but because their system doesn't feel safe enough to engage. Now, let's look at how great coaches empower follow through. This is where mastery lives. Great coaches don't fix follow through, they create the conditions for it. They investigate before they intervene. Instead of asking, why didn't you do it? They ask, what got in the way? What felt hard about this? What did your body notice when you tried? They lead with curiosity, not correction. Because information gathered here is more valuable than any strategy offered too soon. They coach capacity, not compliance. Great coaches don't ask, can you push harder? They ask, what can your system actually sustain? And as a result, they explore what feels doable without force. What's one small step that wouldn't create resistance? What would support you right now, not stretch you? Progress doesn't come from willpower. It comes from capacity matched to reality. Great coaches also normalize struggle without normalizing stuckness. Exceptional coaches validate without rescuing. They say things like, It makes sense this was hard. Or your nervous system is learning something new. Let's slow this down and understand it. This reduces shame without removing responsibility. As a result, your clients stay engaged when they feel understood, not analyzed. Great coaches also make sessions experiential. They don't leave transformation for later. They regulate with the client, they practice language live, they slow moments down, they anchor insight in the body. Because change doesn't begin after the session, it begins inside of it. Now take a moment to place one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. Take a slow inhale through your nose and then a longer exhale. And now gently reflect. Think of a client who struggled with follow through. Instead of asking, what should they do differently? Ask, what might their nervous system need to feel safer? Where might I have moved too fast? What would empowerment look like instead of pressure? This shift from performance to presence is coaching maturity. It's important to keep in mind that follow through is a relationship, not a task. Clients don't follow through because they trust plans. They follow through because they trust relationships. Consistency grows when expectations are realistic, autonomy is respected, safety is present, and repair is possible. Exceptional coaches don't measure success by compliance. They measure it by awareness, self-trust, increased capacity, and sustainable change. Follow through isn't obedience, it's engagement. So if your clients aren't following through, it doesn't mean you're ineffective or that they're unmotivated or that the work is failing. It may mean the work needs to slow down, deepen, and become more attuned. Coaching excellence isn't about pushing harder. It's about listening better, refining presence, building safety, empowering capacity. That's how real change happens. Thank you for being here and for caring enough about your coaching craft to ask these questions. If this episode resonated, please consider sharing it with another coach who's questioning their effectiveness, or simply let it inform you how you show up in your next session. Give it a follow, and I look forward to sharing more new episodes with you every week.